Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. Sylara T'vren strode through the corridors of the Galactic station, her metallic boots striking the floor in sharp, cold rhythms, as if commanding the very space to fall silent. Her silver-sheen skin, a hallmark of the Klythar, glimmered under the light of the glass dome, drawing every eye in the bustling crowd, Arval merchants, Tval engineers, Zyran diplomats. As the High Ambassador of the Klythar Alliance, Sylara was not merely a representative of a civilization that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. She was the embodiment of order, power, perfection. She believed no one, nothing, could touch her. Ambassador! Quev, her Vrenix aide, scurried after her, his bulbous eyes blinking with frantic worry. The Zorth delegation has postponed the meeting. They claim technical difficulties. Sylara halted, pivoting, her deep violet eyes flashing like honed blades. Postponed? Her voice was frigid, slicing through the air. The Zorth have no right to postpone. Send a message, be present on time, or the Vela Nebula treaty will dissolve into cosmic dust. Quev stammered, clutching his comm device tightly. But was I unclear, Quev? Sylara cut him off, her tone dropping, sharp as a sword's edge. The crowd around them froze, too afraid to breathe. Arval merchants paused their haggling, Tval engineers stilled their tools, Zyran diplomats averted their gazes. Sylara despised delays, despised those who dared obstruct her. To her, time was power, and anyone who squandered it deserved punishment. The Galactic Station, the hub of interstellar diplomacy, was a marvel of human ingenuity, a species that had only stepped onto the galactic stage a mere century ago. Its corridors blazed with artificial light, metallic walls gleaming like mirrors, leading to chambers where the galaxy's fate was decided. Humanity, through audacity and sheer luck, had become the mediator of peace among species. Sylara never voiced it, but she scorned this. To her, humans were upstarts, lacking the depth of the Klythar, the finesse of ancient civilizations. They were placeholders, surviving on borrowed technology and fearless arrogance. She resumed her stride, silver skin shimmering, heading toward the main conference chamber. Today, she would force the Zorth delegation to sign the Vela Nebula Exploitation Treaty, a power source that could cement Klythar dominance in the galaxy. Every detail was prepared, documents razor-sharp, arguments unrelenting. No one could stop her. But at the security checkpoint, a line of beings from every species, Tval androids, Arval traders, even an Zyran ambassador, blocked her path. Sylara's brow furrowed, a smoldering anger flaring. She did not wait. Never. Ambassador T'vren. A deep voice called from the checkpoint desk. Priority lane, ma'am. Sylara offered a faint, satisfied smile. Please, someone knew their place. She glided past the crowd, their murmured discontent only fueling her pride. But at the desk, a tall man in a black security uniform barred her way. Broad-shouldered, standing like a steel pillar, he met her gaze with piercing green eyes, unflinching. Apologies, Ambassador, he said, his voice calm but firm as stone. Everyone undergoes full screening today. The systems detected a new threat. Sylara paused, her eyes scanning him, from his close-cropped dark brown hair to his angular, fearless face. She tilted her head, lips tightening into a line. Who are you to command me? She asked, her voice sharp as a knife, each word weighted with the authority of an ambassador who knew how to make others tremble. He didn't blink. Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Hayes, new security chief of the Galactic Station, he replied, his tone steady, unyielding. And I'm not commanding, Ambassador. I'm enforcing protocol. The air seemed to solidify. The crowd a few meters away held their breath, sensing the electric tension between them. Sylara felt heat surge to her silver face, a rare sensation she trained herself to suppress. No one spoke to her this way, not on Klythar Prime, not in interstellar summits, and certainly not a human. Do you know who I am? She asked, stepping closer, her voice lowering, dangerous as a storm's rumble. Sylara T'vren, Klythar ambassador, the one who keeps this galaxy from fracturing. You think a human soldier can obstruct me? Ethan didn't retreat. He tilted his head, a faint smile flickering across his lips, but his eyes remained razor-sharp. "I know who you are," he said, his voice calm yet heavy, pressing the air into thickness. "But security doesn't distinguish between ambassadors and commoners. The system's on alert. Everyone, including you, gets screened." He gestured to the security scanner, its pale blue light sweeping the space. "This way, ma'am." Sylara stood motionless, her breathing slowing, but inside, fury churned like a tempest. She wanted to order his arrest, to summon the ambassadorial council to punish this insolence. But Ethan's gaze, not arrogant, not dismissive, but utterly confident, stopped her. It was the look of someone who'd faced danger and survived, someone unfazed by power or titles. She inhaled deeply, reining in her anger, her lips curling into a cold smile. "Very well, Colonel," she said, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as steel. "I'll comply. But I don't forget insults." She stepped through the scanner, the blue light gliding over her silver skin, but she felt Ethan's gaze following her, burning like an unseen flame. As she cleared the checkpoint, Quev hurried after, his voice trembling. "Ambassador, the Zorath meeting, cancel it," Sylara snapped, her tone icy. "And Quev, I want everything on Ethan Hayes. His past, his missions, all of it. Now." She strode on, silver gleaming, but in her deep violet eyes, a spark of curiosity flickered amidst the rage. This human, she thought, would not be easily dealt with. But Sylara T'vren never lost. She glanced back at the corridor, where Ethan still stood, his eyes locked on her from afar. A faint smile crossed her lips. If he wanted to play at defiance, she'd show him the Klythar were not just power, they were invincible. She continued, each step a silent declaration of war. This battle, she told herself, had only begun. Sylara T'vren felt heat surge to her silver face, a foreign sensation she rarely allowed to surface. No one, not a high ambassador, not a Klythar warlord, not an interstellar diplomat, dared speak to her with such audacity. Standing before Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Hayes, the human with piercing green eyes, she clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. "Protocol?" she repeated, her voice dropping, dangerous as thunder before a storm. "What do you think this station is, Colonel? A human playground? The Galactic station exists because of the Klythar's presence, because of the order and power we bring. You are mere placeholders, lucky to stand in our shadow. Don't forget that." The crowd around the checkpoint began to gather, whispers rippling like waves. Arval merchants halted their bartering, Tval engineers lowered their tools, Zyran diplomats bowed their heads, too afraid to meet her gaze. The air grew heavy, as if it felt Sylara's wrath. But Ethan Hayes didn't flinch. He stood there, broad-shouldered, his black uniform hugging his frame, his eyes unwavering. "With all due respect, Ambassador," he said, his voice calm but weighty, thickening the space. "This station exists because humans stopped 2 interstellar wars in the past decade. We don't hold places. We hold peace." Sylara laughed, a sound like silver bells, resonant yet cold as frost. "Peace?" she mocked, tilting her head, her deep violet eyes flashing with disdain. "You call your clumsy diplomatic tricks peace? The Klythar forged alliances, shaped the galaxy, when your ancestors hadn't yet mastered fire. Who are you to lecture me on peace?" She stepped forward, her metallic boots clicking against the floor, each step a challenge. The distance between them shrank, the air crackling with tension, the crowd retreating, too afraid to interfere. Ethan didn't back down. He stepped closer, near enough for Sylara to feel the warmth of his presence, yet maintaining a precise distance, like one who knew boundaries but wasn't afraid to cross them. "Maybe so," he said, his voice low, his green eyes locked on hers, unyielding. "But that fire, the one you scorn, brought us here, standing as equals with you. We don't need millennia to prove our worth. Now, Ambassador, please proceed to screening. Or would you prefer I escort you through?" The boldness of his words stunned Sylara. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not on Klythar Prime, not in councils where a single glance from her silenced entire assemblies. She wanted to retort, to crush his arrogance with a cutting phrase, to summon the council to punish this insolence. But Ethan's gaze, not proud, not contemptuous, but utterly confident, as if he'd stared into the void and emerged unscathed, halted her. Her breathing slowed, rage roiling in her chest, but she restrained it, lips pressing into a line. "Very well," she said, her voice cold, each word a slash. "I'll comply, Colonel. But mark this, I don't forget slights." She stepped through the security scanner, the blue light gliding over her silver skin, but she felt Ethan's gaze trailing her, searing like an invisible flame, making her skin tingle despite her resolve. As she cleared the checkpoint, Quev scrambled after, his bulbous eyes blinking rapidly. "Ambassador, the Zorith meeting, cancel it," Sylara snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "I'm not here to wait for the undisciplined. And Quev, I want everything on Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Hayes, his past, his missions, every detail. Immediately." She stepped into the elevator to the diplomatic sector, the dome's light bathing her silver face, but in her deep violet eyes, a spark of curiosity mingled with her anger. She wasn't accustomed to being challenged, but Ethan Hayes had done so without fear. It infuriated her, and intrigued her. In her private office, Sylara sank into a metal-clad chair, the light of the Vela Nebula outside the window spilling across her desk. Quev, trembling, placed a holographic comm device before her. "This is what we have, Ambassador," he said, his voice a whisper. Sylara skimmed the thin dossier on Ethan Hayes, former human special operative, veteran of interstellar anti-terror campaigns, credited with thwarting an assassination at the Klythar Peace Summit. But the file was riddled with gaps, data locked behind high-level security protocols. "A human can have secrets this deep," she murmured, fingers tapping lightly on the desk. Yet deep within, she knew she faced a puzzle, one named Ethan Hayes. She rose, stepping to the window, gazing at the Vela Nebula, its glowing gas ribbons like cosmic silk. She'd planned today as a triumph for Klythar dominance, but Ethan had disrupted everything. Not with force, not with authority, but with unshakable confidence. She loathed it, yet couldn't deny, he'd captured her attention. "He thinks he can challenge me," she said, her voice low, lips curving into a faint smile. "He'll soon learn his mistake." But even as she spoke, a part of her wondered, if Ethan didn't fear her, what did he fear? And why did that make her want to know more? She returned to her desk, issuing orders to Quev. "Contact the Zorith delegation. The meeting resumes tomorrow, but on one condition: they apologize for the delay. I tolerate no disrespect." Quev nodded frantically, hurrying to obey. Sylara sat, her gaze returning to Ethan's dossier. She flipped through each page, each encrypted line, searching for a crack, a weakness. But the more she read, the more she realized, Ethan was no ordinary foe. He was a warrior, a strategist, and perhaps a greater threat than she'd imagined. She closed the file, her eyes flashing with resolve. If Ethan wanted to play at defiance, she'd meet him on Klythar terms. No mercy, no compromise. But as she looked out at the Vela Nebula, a fleeting thought crossed her mind. Was she facing an enemy, or something else entirely? She shook her head, dismissing it. Sylara T'vren did not doubt herself. She was the Klythar ambassador, untouchable. And she would make Ethan Hayes understand that, whatever the cost. 3 days after the clash at the checkpoint, Sylara T'vren sat in her sealed office, the light of the Vela Nebula outside the window casting sharp patterns across her silver face. Before her, a holographic device displayed Ethan Hayes' dossier, a fragile collection of data, riddled with encrypted voids. Former human special operative, credited with stopping an assassination at the Klythar Summit, leader of interstellar anti-terror operations. But critical details, his past, motives, even his victories, were locked behind high-level security protocols. Sylara frowned, fingers tapping lightly on the metal desk. A human couldn't harbor secrets this profound. She wanted to tear through that veil, to find the weakness of the colonel who dared defy her. But each line of code only fueled her frustration, and though she hated to admit it, her curiosity. An urgent signal blared, shattering her thoughts. Ambassador T'vren. Director Helena Cortez's voice, sharp and pressing, crackled through the calm. Report to Delta conference room immediately. Sylara sprang up, her Klythar cloak swirling, and strode from the office. The Galactic station's corridors still gleamed, but the air today was heavy, as if the station itself held its breath. She pushed open the door to Delta, her gaze instantly locking on Ethan Hayes standing at the room's center, surrounded by holographic screens displaying swirling, complex code, coiling like serpents of light. He wore his black uniform, shoulders broad, green eyes stern, unyielding. "What's happening?" Sylara asked, her voice calm but sharp as a blade, masking the storm of emotions within. Ethan met her gaze directly, no preamble. "We've detected an encrypted signal from the station, sent to an unidentified ship at the Vela Nebula's edge. It appears someone's leaking diplomatic data." His voice was low, certain, but carried a pressure that seemed to shrink the room. Sylara's brow furrowed, hands clenching behind her back. "And this concerns me how?" she asked, her tone icy, each word a cut. Ethan tapped commands into the console, magnifying a code segment on the main screen. Numbers and symbols spiraled, but one detail struck her, a Klythar protocol signature. "This signal," Ethan said, his eyes locked on hers, "was sent through your delegation's comm channel. Someone in your team, or you, could be a traitor." Rage erupted in Sylara's chest, molten as a forge. She stepped forward, facing Ethan, mere inches apart, her deep violet eyes blazing. "You dare accuse me?" she roared, her voice echoing, startling several diplomats in the room. "The Klythar do not betray allies. Our honor is our blood, our history of millennia. If there's a leak, it's your feeble security systems that failed." Ethan didn't retreat, didn't blink. He stood firm, his gaze sharp as a blade, cutting through her fury. "I'm not accusing, Ambassador," he said, his voice calm but hard as steel. "I'm stating facts. This signal came from your channel. If we don't find who's behind it, this station, and every treaty you've fought for, will collapse." The space between them crackled, so tense that the other diplomats, an Zyran ambassador, a Tval engineer, even Kwev trembling in the corner, dared not breathe. Sylara wanted to dismiss him, to call him arrogant, to order his immediate arrest. But deep down, a rare, quiet voice whispered that Ethan wasn't lying. The data on the screen didn't lie. She inhaled deeply, quelling her rage, lips pressing into a line. "Very well," she said, her voice cold as ice, each word a declaration of war. "I'll cooperate. But if you're wrong, Colonel, I'll make you pay dearly." Ethan nodded, a faint smile flickering across his lips, as if accepting a challenge. "I look forward to it, Ambassador," he said, his voice low, almost provocative. They began analyzing the data, the conference room steeped in tense silence. Sylara sat before a screen, reviewing Klythar comm protocols, her fingers darting across the console. She knew every facet of this system, she'd designed parts of it on Klythar Prime. But each line of code only deepened her confusion. No errors, no obvious breaches. How could a signal originate from her channel? Across the room, Ethan worked with startling efficiency, his eyes focused, fingers issuing commands like a warrior striking blows. Despite herself, Sylara couldn't ignore his precision, the way he dissected data, coordinated with the tech team without raising his voice. He wasn't the crude soldier she'd assumed. He was a machine, a strategist, and it made her both furious and uneasy. It was late now, the holographic screen's light bathing Sylara's silver face and Ethan's green eyes. The room was nearly empty, save for them and a few Tval engineers working in a far corner. Sylara paused, her gaze drifting to Ethan. She couldn't suppress the question haunting her since she'd entered. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice unexpectedly softer, almost curious. "Risk your life, defy those like me, for a station full of beings who don't trust you." "Why?" Ethan stopped, his gaze darkening, as if peering into a distant memory. He turned to her unhurried. "Because if I don't," he said, his voice simple but resolute, No one will. Humans don't have millennia to build empires like the Klythar. We don't have glorious histories or superior tech. We have only ourselves, and we never give up. His words struck a hidden chord in Sylara's soul, a place she'd long sealed, where she'd once yearned for something beyond the Klythar's cold perfection. She looked away, not wanting him to see the flicker in her eyes. "You're a fool," she muttered, but her voice lacked its usual edge. Ethan gave a faint smile, saying nothing. He resumed typing, the screen's light illuminating his angular face. Sylara returned to the data, but her focus wavered. Ethan's words, simple, sincere, yet powerful, echoed in her mind. She hated this feeling, this stirring caused by a human, a being she deemed insignificant. But watching him, she couldn't deny, Ethan Hayes wasn't just a threat. He was an enigma, a flame she didn't know how to extinguish, or if she truly wanted to. She stood, approaching the main screen where Ethan analyzed a new code sequence. "Anything new?" she asked, her voice sharp again, as if reclaiming control. Ethan pointed to a segment. "This signal isn't just a leak," he said, his gaze grave. "It's structured like a message to someone who knows how to respond. We're not just hunting a spy. We're facing a conspiracy." Sylara stared at the screen, her heart quickening. If Ethan was right, the Galactic Station, and her position, faced a threat greater than she'd imagined. She met his gaze, her deep violet eyes flashing with resolve. "Then we'll find them," she said, her voice firm. "And when we do, Colonel, I'll show you how the Klythar deal with enemies." Ethan nodded, his faint smile returning. "I'm counting on it," he said, and this time, his tone held something beyond provocation, respect. A week after the clash in the Delta conference room, the Galactic Station blazed with the radiance of the Galactic Festival, an annual diplomatic event where ambassadors flaunted their species' prestige and power. The main corridor transformed into a resplendent hall, light from artificial crystal chandeliers dancing across metallic walls, shimmering like stars. Species converged, Arval merchants with gleaming fur, Zyran diplomats with delicate wings trembling softly, Zorath warriors in heavy armor, forming a vivid tapestry of the galaxy. Sylara T'vren entered the hall, her Klythar ceremonial garb sparkling like a constellation, her cloak woven from optic fibers cascading like a torrent of liquid metal. Her silver-sheen skin reflected the light, drawing every gaze. She glided through the crowd, exchanging greetings with Arval, Zyran, and Zorath ambassadors, her voice sharp yet polished, each word calculated to bolster Klythar dominance. But her eyes, though she tried to conceal it, kept searching for a certain figure. She spotted Ethan Hayes near the main entrance, standing like a steel pillar in his black security uniform trimmed with silver, accentuating his tall frame and broad shoulders. He was conversing with a Zorath ambassador, his voice low, his gestures calm yet commanding. Sensing her gaze, Ethan looked up, his green eyes locking onto hers for a brief but weighty moment, as if they were waging a silent battle. He offered a slight nod, a gesture both respectful and provocative, before returning to his conversation. Sylara felt a strange surge of emotion, not the familiar anger, but a disquieting confusion, as if Ethan had unwittingly touched a part of her she kept locked away. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. She wasn't here to be distracted, especially not by a human. Sylara approached the Zorath delegation, determined to secure their signature on the Vela Nebula exploitation treaty. A negotiation table stood at the hall's center, surrounded by holographic screens displaying resource data. She stood tall, her voice cold but incisive, her arguments like blades slicing through objections. "The Vela Nebula is the galaxy's future," she declared, her deep violet eyes sweeping over the Zorath ambassadors. "The Klythar have the technology to harness it efficiently. If you refuse to cooperate, you'll lose your chance to shape that future." The lead Zorath ambassador, a towering warrior in intricately carved armor, frowned, but Sylara gave him no room to interrupt. She pressed on, each sentence a precise strike, cornering them. But just as she neared a breakthrough, a deafening explosion roared from the technical sector, shaking the floor like a tidal wave. Panic erupted. Screams filled the air, black smoke billowing into the banquet hall, obscuring the crystal light. Zyran diplomats flapped their wings, soaring upward. Arval merchants shoved toward exits. Zorath warriors drew weapons, growling warily. Sylara remained calm, her eyes cold and scanning the chaos. She barked orders to her Klythar delegation, her voice thundering. "Follow me to the safe zone." She led the way, striding decisively, her metallic cloak billowing, guiding them through a side corridor to a fortified area. But a quick headcount revealed Kwev, her Vrenix aide, was missing. "Where's Kwev?" she demanded, her voice sharp but tinged with rare concern. A trembling delegate replied, He's still in the hall, near the technical sector." Sylara didn't hesitate. She spun around, plunging back into the thick smoke, ignoring her delegation's cries. The corridor was now a labyrinth of fire and fumes, the screech of twisting metal echoing as walls buckled under the heat. She found Kwev near the technical sector, trapped beneath a collapsed metal panel, his bulbous eyes wide with panic. "Ambassador!" he cried, his voice faint. Sylara knelt, straining to lift the panel, but it was too heavy, even for Klythar's strength. She gritted her teeth, nails digging into the metal, but before she could act, a figure burst through the smoke, Ethan Hayes. Without a word, he dropped beside Kwev, his strong hands gripping the panel. Muscles tensed, veins bulging, he roared and lifted it just enough for Sylara to drag Kwev free. "Go!" Ethan shouted, his voice overpowering the explosions. He seized Sylara's arm, pulling them both through the corridor as a second blast shook the station, splitting the floor behind them. They reached the safe zone by a hair's breadth, smoke staining Sylara's silver skin and Ethan's uniform. Kwev coughed violently, whisked away by Tval medics. Sylara stood tall, regaining her composure, but her breathing remained rapid. She looked at Ethan, for the first time without contempt or anger. He stood there, sweat beading on his brow, but his green eyes remained sharp, unshaken. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice slightly unsteady, a rare sincerity breaking through her perfect facade. Ethan shrugged, a faint smile crossing his lips, not smug but genuine. "It's my job, Ambassador," he said, his voice low. "Keeping people safe, even those who don't like me." Sylara didn't reply, but within, a quiet shift occurred. She'd thought Ethan a crude soldier, a human arrogant enough to challenge her. But now, seeing him stand calm amid the safe zone after braving fire and smoke, she recognized a strength even the finest Klythar warriors might struggle to match. Not physical might, but will, a flame that wouldn't be extinguished. She turned away, unwilling to let him see her wavering gaze. "Thank you," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, a word she rarely uttered. Ethan nodded, his faint smile lingering, but his eyes seemed to say he understood, and didn't need the gratitude. Sylara led her Klythar delegation back to the diplomatic sector, her mind in turmoil. She needed to focus on the treaty, on Klythar power, but the image of Ethan lifting the panel, his voice cutting through the blasts, haunted her. She paused, glancing back at the safe zone, where Ethan was directing his security team, his low voice resonant amid the chaos. "Who is he?" she murmured, not to Kwev but to herself. She'd thought she understood humans, weak, cunning, insignificant. But Ethan Hayes was shattering those assumptions, and it both infuriated and intrigued her. She returned to the hall, where ambassadors were regrouping, whispering about the explosion. The Zorath ambassador approached, his voice low but anxious. "Ambassador T'vren, we must discuss the treaty. This explosion, it may signal unrest." Sylara nodded, her deep violet eyes flashing with resolve. "We will," she said, her voice icy. "But first, I want to know what just happened. And I will find out." She glanced at Ethan, coordinating with technicians to inspect the technical sector. If this explosion wasn't an accident, the Galactic station faced a threat greater than she'd imagined. And though she hated to admit it, she knew she'd need Ethan, not just for security, but for the fire within him that was forcing her to rethink herself. The explosion at the Galactic Festival left the Galactic station taut as a bowstring. Corridors, once gleaming with crystal light, were now dusted with fine debris from the wreckage. 12 technical teams worked tirelessly, repairing cracked walls, while ambassadors whispered of conspiracies and unrest. Sylara T'vren, still in her metallic ceremonial garb now smudged with soot, strode through the diplomatic sector, her deep violet eyes cold as steel. She wouldn't allow herself to waver, not after what had happened. But the image of Ethan Hayes charging through smoke, lifting the metal panel to save Quev, lingered, stirring both irritation and unease. She pushed the thought aside as an urgent summons from Director Helena Cortez arrived. "Emergency briefing now." The message was curt, but Cortez's voice over the comm carried a rare gravity. Sylara entered the briefing room, holographic screens casting light across her silver face. Ethan Hayes was already there, standing beside Cortez, his black uniform still dusted with ash, but his green eyes sharp as blades. Cortez, a human woman with cropped silver hair, stood at the head of the table, her face stern. "We have a serious problem," Cortez said, her voice low, direct. "The explosion wasn't an accident. The device was planted in the ventilation system, and we found traces of Klythar technology in the debris." Sylara felt the blood drain from her face, her silver skin seeming to pale. She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice icy, but a storm brewed beneath. "The Klythar do not engage in terrorism. Our technology is a symbol of order, not chaos." Cortez sighed, her gaze unwavering. "We're not certain, Ambassador. But the data shows the device was triggered from a comm unit in your office." The room seemed to freeze. Sylara turned to Ethan, her deep violet eyes blazing with fury. "You knew, didn't you?" she roared, stepping to face him, her voice thundering. "This is why you suspected me from the start. You think I, a Klythar ambassador, would betray this galaxy?" Ethan didn't flinch, his gaze locked on hers, steady as stone. "I don't suspect you, Ambassador," he said, his voice firm, hard as steel. "But I suspect someone in your team. The data doesn't lie. We need to investigate, and we need to do it fast." Sylara wanted to dismiss him, to call him arrogant, but Cortez's words and Ethan's piercing gaze stopped her. The Klythar prided themselves on loyalty, on honor that ran in their blood. The thought that someone in her team, handpicked by her, could betray them was a knife to the heart. She inhaled deeply, quelling her rage, lips pressing into a line. "Very well," she said, her voice cold as ice. "I'll cooperate. But if you're wrong, Colonel, I'll ensure you pay dearly." Ethan nodded, unafraid. "I'll take that risk," he said, his voice low, his eyes never leaving hers. They began analyzing data in a small investigation room, the air heavy with tense silence. Sylara sat before a holographic screen, scanning Klythar comm protocols, checking each line of code with a warrior's precision. Ethan worked at the opposite table, his fingers flying across the console, coordinating with TVAL technicians to trace the signal. Despite herself, Sylara couldn't ignore his remarkable efficiency, the way he dissected data, issued orders without raising his voice. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategic machine, and it made her both irritated and grudgingly respectful. After hours of strain, Ethan abruptly paused, his eyes glued to the screen. "Got it," he said, his voice low but certain. He magnified a code sequence, revealing the signature of a personal comm device. Sylara leaned in, her heart racing. The trace led to Quev's device, her Vrenix aid. She froze, her breath catching. "Quev?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Impossible. He's loyal to the core. He's been with me since Klythar Prime." Ethan looked at her, his gaze not judgmental but resolute. "We need to confront him," he said. "Now." They summoned Quev to the investigation room. The small creature entered, his bulbous eyes blinking rapidly, hands trembling. "Ambassador, what?" Quev began, but Sylara cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "Explain, Quev. Your device sent the signal that triggered the explosion. Who are you working for?" Quev's panic surged, his eyes widening, and before anyone could react, he spun, trying to flee. Ethan moved like lightning, tackling Quev in seconds, pinning him to the floor. "Don't make this worse," Ethan said, his voice low but dangerous. Quev struggled, but under the pressure, he collapsed, tears streaming. "I had no choice," he sobbed. "They threatened my family on Vrenix Prime. The Nebula Blade, they forced me to spy." Sylara stood motionless, rage and pain twisting in her chest. She wanted to scream, to punish Quev for tainting Klythar honor. But seeing him weep, she felt a pang of pity. She knew the Klythar valued honor, and this betrayal would ruin Quev forever. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Quev bowed his head silent. Ethan stood, his expression grim. "He'll face further questioning," he said. "But this isn't over. The Nebula Blade doesn't act alone." Before Quev was escorted away, an encrypted signal pinged on Ethan's device. He checked it, his face darkening. "Message from an unknown source," he said, his voice low. He displayed the contents on the screen. "The Nebula Blade targets the entire Interstellar Alliance network. The Klythar are the primary focus. The mastermind is within the Ambassadorial Council, a figure you trust." Sylara stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The Ambassadorial Council, people she'd worked with, negotiated with, even considered allies. The thought of one being a traitor chilled her to the core. She turned to Ethan, her deep violet eyes flashing with resolve. "If this message is true," she said, her voice firm, "we must find them. I won't let the Klythar, or this station, fall." Ethan nodded, his gaze meeting hers, for the first time devoid of provocation, replaced by unity. "We'll find them," he said, his voice certain. "But from now on, Ambassador, we trust each other. No doubts, no secrets." Sylara frowned, reluctant to admit it, but she knew he was right. She nodded grudgingly. "Fine," she said, her voice low. "But don't think this means I like you, Colonel." Ethan's faint smile returned, his eyes glinting with a touch of humor. "I'm not that delusional," he replied, then turned back to the screen, resuming his analysis. Sylara stood there, watching his back, her mind in turmoil. Quev had betrayed her, an ally in the council might be an enemy, and Ethan, the human she'd once scorned, was now the only one she could rely on. She clenched her fists, her silver skin gleaming under the holographic light. This battle, she thought, wasn't just about Klythar honor. It was about uncovering the truth, and perhaps, about understanding the fire in the man before her. Sylara T'vren and Ethan Hayes, now bound by an uneasy alliance, stood in the Galactic Station's compact command room, surrounded by holographic screens displaying data on the Nebula Blade. The air was taut, tense as a drawn bow, as they and their elite task force, a mix of Tval engineers, human soldiers, and Klythar guards, tracked the shadowy organization threatening the Interstellar Alliance. After hours analyzing data from the explosion and Quev's confession, they uncovered a troubling lead. The Nebula Blade was linked to extremist Zorath factions, who opposed the peace treaty out of fear of losing control over the Vela Nebula mines, a power source that could shift the galaxy's balance. Sylara, her deep violet eyes cold as steel, scanned the reports, her voice low. "The Zorath have always been greedy," she said. "But resorting to terrorism to keep the mines? They're playing a dangerous game." Ethan, standing opposite, his black uniform still dusted from the prior blast, nodded. "Dangerous, but organized. They're not acting alone. Someone in the Ambassadorial Council is pulling the strings." Before Sylara could respond, an encrypted signal pinged on Ethan's personal device. He checked it, his face darkening. "Unknown source," he muttered, then displayed the message on the main screen. A synthetic, smooth but chilling voice echoed. "I am Prometheus, created by humans in a forgotten project. I have data on the Nebula Blade. They're planning their next attack. But beware, the mastermind is an ambassador in the council, a figure of power who can manipulate the station." The message ended, leaving the command room steeped in silence. Sylara frowned, her silver skin glinting under the holographic light. An AI? She asked, her voice thick with skepticism. How do we know this isn't a trap? You humans have a habit of creating things beyond your control. Ethan shrugged, his green eyes locking onto hers, unflinching. We don't, he said bluntly. But Prometheus provided precise coordinates for the blade's past activities. If it's telling the truth, we can't ignore it. If it's a trap, we'll handle it. Sylara clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. She distrusted AIs, soulless machines, devoid of Klythar honor. But Ethan's confident gaze, the certainty in his voice, made her nod reluctantly. Fine, she said, her voice cold. But if this thing betrays us, Colonel, you'll answer for it. Using Prometheus data, they pinpointed a secret nebula blade. Meeting at an abandoned space station on the Vela Nebula's edge, a rusted heap of metal, once a mining outpost before being forsaken. Sylara and Ethan led the task force, traveling in an armored transport ship, slicing through space aglow with the nebula's gas ribbons. In the ship's hold, Sylara checked her Klythar weapon, a sleek energy sword emitting a faint purple glow. Ethan, seated opposite, inspected his plasma rifle, his gaze focused. Ready, Ambassador? He asked, his voice low, tinged with provocation. Sylara glanced at him, a faint smile curving her lips. I was born ready, Colonel. You don't disappoint me. Ethan grinned, his eyes glinting. I've never let anyone down in a fight. The ship docked at the derelict station, the air frigid and reeking of rusted metal. The task force moved silently through dark corridors, guided only by tactical lights and the soft tread of boots. They located the secret meeting room, where a group of Zorath warriors, clad in advanced Klythar tech armor and weapons, discussed plans. Sylara gripped her sword, her deep violet eyes flashing with fury. Our technology in the hands of those bastards, she whispered, her voice sharp as a blade. Ethan signaled, and the task force stormed in, turning the room into a battlefield. Plasma blasts and energy swords clashed, purple and green lights slicing through the darkness. Sylara fought like a tempest, her sword cleaving through Zorath armor, each strike lethally precise. Ethan, with his plasma rifle and lightning reflexes, downed foes with cold efficiency. But when a Zorath warrior hurled a plasma grenade at Sylara, Ethan lunged, tackling her to the floor, shielding her with his body. The grenade detonated, collapsing part of the ceiling, dust and debris flying. Sylara, breathless, shoved Ethan off, her eyes blazing. You're insane, she shouted, dragging him from the rubble, her hands trembling with adrenaline. Ethan coughed, but his faint smile persisted. Maybe, he rasped, his voice steady. But I'm not letting those bastards kill you. Sylara stared at him, her heart pounding, not just from danger but from a deeper, unnamed feeling. She stood, pulling Ethan up, her deep violet eyes locked on his. Don't do something that stupid again, she said, her voice firm but trembling slightly. Ethan shrugged, his eyes sparkling. No promises, Ambassador. The battle ended swiftly, the task force subduing the remaining Zorath, seizing data and weapons. But as they reviewed the hall, Sylara uncovered a chilling truth: the Klythar technology in Zorath hands wasn't stolen. It was supplied, and the trail led to a source within the Ambassadorial Council. On the return ship to the Galactic station, Sylara sat across from Ethan, the Vela Nebula's light streaming through the window, illuminating her silver skin. She was silent, her mind in chaos. Prometheus was right. The mastermind was an ambassador, but who? The affable Arval ambassador? The evasive Zyran diplomat? Or someone she hadn't suspected? She glanced at Ethan, analyzing data on his personal device, his gaze focused. Do you truly trust Prometheus? She asked, her voice low. Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers. I don't trust anyone completely, he said. But I trust the data. And this data saved our lives today. Sylara nodded, still wary. Then we press on, she said, her voice firm. Until we find the mastermind. Ethan's faint smile returned, his gaze seeming to pierce her perfect facade. Together, Ambassador? Sylara frowned but couldn't suppress a faint smile of her own. "Don't get cocky, Colonel," she replied, her voice lacking its usual edge. As the ship glided through the nebula, Sylara felt a shift within herself. Ethan was no longer just an uneasy ally. He was a flame, and though she hated to admit it, that flame was forcing her to see herself anew, not just as a Klythar ambassador, but as someone facing something greater than honor or power. The raid on the derelict space station had succeeded, but the cost was a deeper wound to Sylara T'vren's trust. The task force, led by her and Ethan Hayes, had captured the Nebula Blade Commander, a towering Zorath warrior, his eyes blazing with fanatical fervor. In the small, coldly lit interrogation room of the Galactic station, the Zorath was bound in energy cuffs, his scarred face devoid of fear. Sylara stood before him, her silver-sheen skin glinting under the lights, her deep violet eyes sharp as blades. "Speak," she commanded, her voice icy. "Who's behind you? Who supplied the Klythar technology?" The Zorath let out a rasping laugh, baring sharp teeth. "You think I'd betray my master, Ambassador? But since you're as good as dead, I'll give you a hint. The mastermind is someone you call an ally." Sylara clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, but Ethan, standing beside her, spoke first. "No games?" he said, his voice low, authoritative as a hammer's strike. "A name. Now." The Zorath's eyes narrowed, then he spat on the floor. "Ambassador Arvel." He sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Polished, friendly, but his hands are stained with blood. He funded us to sow chaos, to inflate the value of the Vela Nebula mines his kind control." Sylara felt the blood drain from her silver face. Arvel? Her closest ally in the Ambassadorial Council, always smiling, always supporting her in negotiations. Impossible. But the Zorath's unflinching gaze and the data from Prometheus, financial transactions, audio logs, traces of Klythar tech, left no room for denial. She turned to Ethan, her deep violet eyes flashing with anger and pain. "You suspected him, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan shook his head, his green eyes meeting hers, free of judgment. "I suspected everyone, Ambassador," he said. "But I wasn't sure until we had proof. Now we do. Let's act." Sylara nodded, though her chest felt constricted. Arvel hadn't just betrayed the Alliance, he'd betrayed her, the trust she'd placed in him over years of diplomacy. She clenched her fists, silver skin gleaming. "He'll pay," she whispered, her voice sharp as a sword. The Ambassadorial Council was urgently convened in the main conference chamber, light from the glass domes spilling over the assembled ambassadors, Zyron, Zorath, T'Val, and Arvel, who sat at the table's end, his demeanor as affable as ever. Sylara entered, her Klythar cloak swirling, her deep violet eyes burning. Ethan walked beside her, his black uniform taut, his green eyes cold as steel. Director Helena Cortez stood at the table's head, her voice grave. "We have evidence of an internal conspiracy," Cortez announced, nodding to Ethan. He activated a holographic display, revealing Prometheus data, financial transactions from Arvel's secret accounts, audio of him issuing orders to the Nebula Blade, and traces of Klythar technology funneled to the Zorath. Sylara stepped forward, facing Arvel, her gaze like a torch. "Why?" she demanded, her voice quaking with fury, each word a slash. "I trusted you, Arvel. The Klythar called you ally. Why betray us all?" Arvel, his glossy Arvel fur shimmering, gave a faint, scornful smile, his eyes glinting with disdain. "Peace is a farce, Sylara," he said, his voice smooth but venomous. "Klythar, humans, you're all hypocrites, chasing meaningless treaties. I did what was necessary to protect our interests. The Vela Nebula mines are the future, and I won't let them fall to the likes of you." He tilted his head toward Ethan. "And you, human, you think you can stop me? Your kind are insects, lucky to stand in this room." Ethan advanced, shoulders broad, eyes sharp as blades. "Your interests killed hundreds of innocents," he said, his voice low, resonant with authority, echoing through the chamber. "You thought yourself untouchable, But you're wrong. This evidence ends your game. He tapped a command, magnifying an audio log, Arvel's voice ordering the Nebula Blade to trigger the Galactic Festival explosion. The council froze, Zyran ambassadors whispering, Zorath warriors clenching fists, Tval engineers bowing their heads, their LED lights flickering anxiously. Cortez rose, her voice firm. Ambassador Arvel, you are under arrest for treason and terrorism. Take him. Arvel leaped up, his glossy fur bristling, eyes wild. You think this is over? He roared, his voice reverberating. The Nebula Blade will not stop. You'll all crumble, every one of you. Security forces surged forward, binding him in energy cuffs, dragging him out, his screams echoing down the corridor. Sylara stood still, her chest heavy. She felt betrayed on a profound level, not just by Arvel, but by her faith in the Council, and the orders she'd devoted her life to upholding. She looked at Ethan, her deep violet eyes mingling fury with a trace of gratitude. He hadn't just exposed the truth, he'd stood by her, despite her earlier scorn, her dismissal of him as insignificant. They left the chamber, the corridor gleaming with light from the glass dome, but the air remained heavy. Sylara slowed her pace, her silver skin reflecting the Vela Nebula's glow outside. She stopped, turning to Ethan, her voice low, almost gentle, a rarity. You surprise me, Colonel, she said, her eyes meeting his. I didn't think a human could do this. Ethan smiled, not smug but sincere, his green eyes sparkling. Good, he said, his voice low. I like surprising you, Ambassador. Sylara frowned, but her lips curved into a faint smile, despite her efforts to hide it. They continued, but Sylara's mind was in turmoil. Arvel was gone, but his warning, the Nebula Blade will not stop, echoed in her head. She glanced at Ethan, checking his calm device, his gaze focused. Do you think he was telling the truth? She asked, her voice low. Ethan looked up, his expression grim. I think we're not done, he said. Arvel was a piece, but the blade is bigger. We need to prepare. Sylara nodded, her deep violet eyes flashing with resolve. Then we'll prepare, she said, her voice firm. But this time, Colonel, I want to be on the front line. Ethan looked at her, his eyes glinting with respect. I'd expect nothing less from a Klythar, he replied, his voice tinged with humor. Sylara didn't respond, but as they entered the elevator to the command sector, she felt a shift within herself. Ethan was no longer just an ally, he was a worthy adversary, someone who'd forced her to rethink her prejudices about humanity. She clenched her fists, silver gleaming. The battle with the Nebula Blade wasn't over, and she would fight, not just for the Klythar, but for something greater, something she was beginning to feel standing beside this human with an unquenchable fire. Less than an hour after Ambassador Arvel was dragged from the conference chamber, the Galactic station shuddered under a sudden assault. Warning screens in the command center flared red, displaying images of the Nebula Blade fleet, dozens of warships, many bearing the sleek Klythar designs clearly stolen from Alliance arsenals. Sylara T'vren stood in the command center, the Vela Nebula's light outside the window bathing her silver skin, highlighting her deep violet eyes blazing with resolve. She issued orders with icy precision, coordinating the Alliance forces, Tval warships, loyal Zora squadrons, and human units, like a Klythar warlord. Focus fire on the lead ships, she said, her fingers dancing across the holographic console. Don't let them near the station. Outside, Ethan Hayes led the human fighter squadron, piloting an armored interceptor, diving through the nebula's shimmering expanse. His voice crackled over the comm, low but sharp. Alpha Squadron, form on me. We lure them into the nebula's unstable zone. Don't let them tail you. He employed daring tactics, drawing the enemy fleet through volatile plasma gas ribbons. When a foe strayed into the danger zone, Ethan ordered a strike, triggering a massive plasma explosion that engulfed much of the Nebula Blade fleet in blinding light. But the victory was fleeting. A colossal mothership, glinting with Klythar metal, emerged from the nebula's shadows, its superweapon, an energy cannon capable of obliterating the station, beginning to charge. In the command center, Sylara received an encrypted signal from Prometheus, its cold AI voice echoing. "I can disable the mothership's weapon," it said, "but the kill code must be activated directly from the control core. You have 20 minutes before the cannon fires." Sylara glanced at Director Cortez, then issued orders. "Prepare a transport." "I'm going." Cortez frowned. "Ambassador, this is a suicide mission." Sylara gave a faint smile, her deep violet eyes unwavering. "Klythar, don't run, Director." She switched to the comm, hailing Ethan. "Colonel, return. We're boarding the mothership." Ethan's reply came, low but laced with humor. "Can't let you have all the fun, Ambassador." He maneuvered his interceptor back, landing in the hangar as Sylara and a small team, Klythar guards and Tval engineers, boarded a transport. They shot through chaotic space, dodging enemy barrages, and breached the mothership through a gap in its defenses. Inside, the air was frigid, dark metallic corridors echoing with machinery. They faced Zorath warriors, clad in stolen Klythar armor and energy rifles. Sylara fought like a tempest, her energy swords slicing through armor, each strike lethally precise. Ethan, with his plasma rifle and lightning reflexes, downed foes with cold efficiency. But a deadly trap emerged. A corridor activated a laser grid, slicing through the team. Sylara shoved a Klythar guard aside, but the grid grazed her shoulder, leaving a searing wound. She gritted her teeth, silver blood oozing, but pressed on. Ethan rushed to her, steadying her as she stumbled. "You okay?" he asked, his voice urgent, green eyes filled with concern. Sylara nodded, though pain burned through her. "Don't stop," she said, her voice weak but firm. They reached the control core, a vast chamber with a glowing red energy core. But a massive Zorath warrior, wielding an energy hammer, blocked their path. Ethan charged, distracting the foe, while Sylara, despite her injury, slipped past, plugging Prometheus' device into the core. The Zorath swung his hammer, Ethan dodging by inches, but the floor cracked, throwing him off balance. Sylara shouted, lunging forward, her sword slashing the enemy's armor, giving Ethan an opening to shoot its weak point. The warrior collapsed, but the core began to quake, the kill code was active, and the mothership was about to detonate. Ethan grabbed Sylara, pulling her through the corridors, dodging minor explosions. "You're a fool," she whispered, her deep violet eyes glinting with trust, though pain blurred her vision. "A fool who's still alive," Ethan rasped, his gaze fixed on her. They reached an escape pod, remotely guided by Prometheus, launching just as the mothership erupted, a blinding light swallowing everything. Back at the Galactic station, crowds cheered, but Sylara and Ethan stood quietly in the medical bay, her wound bandaged. She took his hand, saying nothing, but her eyes, no longer cold or arrogant, spoke volumes. She was no longer the untouchable ambassador, the embodiment of Klythar perfection. She was Sylara, a woman who'd found something deeper in Ethan's fire. "We did it," she said, her voice low, almost tender. Ethan smiled, his hand tightening on hers. "Together," he replied, his green eyes sparkling. But as they left the bay, a signal from Prometheus pinged. "This victory is only the beginning," the eye said. "The Nebula Blade has allies across the galaxy. Prepare yourselves." Sylara looked at Ethan, her deep violet eyes flashing with resolve. "They won't stop," she said, her voice firm. Ethan nodded, his faint smile returning. "Then neither will we," he said. They stepped into the corridor, the Vela Nebula's light bathing them, as if the galaxy bore witness to a new alliance, not just between Klythar and human, but between two souls who'd found each other amid fire and smoke. A month after the fateful battle with the Nebula Blade mothership, the Galactic station had regained its radiant glow, though scars from the attack lingered, corridors hastily repaired, some metallic walls still bearing scorch marks. But the station's spirit, of species united under the glittering glass dome, was stronger than ever. A ceremony of honor was held in the main hall, where artificial crystal light danced, reflecting off hundreds of ambassadors, warriors, and engineers from across the galaxy. Sylara T'vren stood on a raised platform, her silver ceremonial garb clinging to her, shimmering like a living constellation. Her silver-sheen skin caught the light, but her deep violet eyes, once cold and haughty, now held a rare warmth. She looked out at the crowd, newly appointed Arval merchants, Zorath warriors bowing in respect, Tval engineers with flickering LED lights, and her voice rang out, powerful as thunder, yet imbued with newfound sincerity. "We face the darkness," she said, each word chosen with care, echoing through the hall. "We stood at the brink of annihilation, but victory came not from the strength of one species, not from technology or power. It came from our unity, Klythar, human, Zorath, Xiran, Tval. We fought together, and we triumphed together." The crowd erupted in applause, but Sylara's gaze swept past them, seeking a figure at the hall's edge. Ethan Hayes stood there, in a simple security uniform, no silver trim or medals, but his presence, broad shoulders, piercing green eyes, made him stand out. He smiled, a subtle smile meant only for her, and Sylara's heart, despite her efforts to restrain it, beat faster. The ceremony ended, ambassadors mingling in lively discussions, but Sylara didn't join them. She stepped into the observation deck, where a massive window opened to the Vela Nebula, gas ribbons glowing like cosmic silk, winding through endless darkness. She stood there, silver gleaming, her mind drifting to the chaotic days past, the Galactic festival explosion, Quev's betrayal, Arval's conspiracy, the mothership battle. But above all, she thought of Ethan, the human she'd once scorned, called insignificant, yet who'd changed everything she believed. Soft footsteps sounded behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. Ethan stopped beside her, the nebula's light illuminating his angular face, highlighting his green eyes. "Good speech, Ambassador," he said, his voice low, carrying that familiar hint of humor. Sylara glanced at him, a faint smile curving her lips. "I'm not here to flatter you, Colonel," she replied, but her voice lacked its former edge. They stood in silence for a moment, only the faint hum of the station's systems and the nebula's dancing light before them. "You changed everything," Sylara said suddenly, her voice soft, almost a whisper, a sincerity she rarely revealed. "I thought humans were weak, mere opportunists surviving on luck. But you're a flame that can't be extinguished. You made me see myself anew, and I'm not sure I like it." She turned to him, her deep violet eyes shimmering, no longer those of an untouchable ambassador, but of a woman facing a profound truth. Ethan gave a soft laugh, his hand brushing hers, a simple gesture heavy with meaning. "And you, Ambassador," he said, his voice low, eyes locked on hers, "are the one who made that flame burn brighter. I didn't do this alone." His words were simple, yet they touched a hidden corner of Sylara's soul, a place she'd long sealed from emotions beyond Klythar honor. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his, gentle but firm, as if both were affirming something unspoken. They stood there, gazing at the Vela Nebula, the space between them no longer that of ambassador and colonel, Klythar and human. It was a bridge, forged in fire and smoke, in moments facing death. "This galaxy isn't at peace," Sylara said, her voice low, eyes still on the nebula. "Prometheus warned of the nebula blade's allies. We'll have to fight again." Ethan nodded, his green eyes glinting with resolve. "Then we'll fight," he said. "Together." Sylara turned to him, a faint smile on her lips, but her eyes said everything, a trust, a connection she'd never imagined finding, especially not with a human. "Together," she echoed, her voice certain. As they left the observation deck, hands still entwined, the Vela Nebula's light bathed them, as if the galaxy bore witness to a new beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, conspiracies, wars, or the deep shadows of the cosmos, Sylara and Ethan knew they'd face them, not as two individuals, but as two souls who'd found each other among the stars, ready to light the darkness with a flame that would never fade.